When you look out the window and see the clouds far below, you're flying at over 10,000 meters. But why do commercial airplanes fly so high? Why not lower or even higher? It's not just about comfort or saving fuel. There are some surprising reasons behind it, and some of them can mean the difference between a safe flight and a disaster. Stay until the end because there's a fact that very few people know, and it might completely change how you see commercial flights. Flying high helps save fuel. Yes, a lot. In fact, this is one of the main reasons why commercial airplanes cruise at high altitudes. But how exactly does flying higher reduce fuel consumption? The key is air resistance. At lower altitudes, the air is denser. That means the aircraft has to push through more air molecules, making the engines work harder and burn more fuel. At around 10,000 meters, or 33,000 feet and above, the air is thinner. Less resistance means less effort from the engines, and therefore, significant fuel savings. And here's something impressive. Fuel represents between 30% and 40% of an airline's operating costs. So any reduction in fuel consumption can save millions of dollars. There's also another interesting trick. During long flights, airplanes burn tons of fuel and become lighter. Pilots take advantage of this by climbing even higher during the flight to improve efficiency. This method is called a step climb, and it's a strategy airlines use to save even more fuel. But if flying higher reduces resistance, shouldn't airplanes just fly even higher? It sounds logical, but there's a problem. Jet engines need oxygen to function. The higher you go, the less oxygen there is in the air. If an aircraft flies too high, its engines lose power because there isn't enough oxygen for combustion. Also, wings generate less lift in thinner air, making it harder for the plane to stay airborne. That's why commercial airplanes operate in a balance between altitude, speed, and efficiency. They can't fly too high, but flying too low isn't efficient either. Now, here's something most people don't know. Airplanes can take advantage of air currents to fly faster and save even more fuel. At high altitudes, there are powerful air currents called jet streams, which can reach speeds of up to 400 kilometers per hour, or about 250 miles per hour. If a plane aligns with a jet stream in its favor, it can increase its speed without using more power. This means it reaches its destination faster while using less fuel. However, if it flies against a jet stream, the opposite happens. The flight slows down and fuel consumption increases. That's why pilots and air traffic controllers constantly study routes to take advantage of these winds whenever possible. Does flying high avoid turbulence? For the most part, yes. Most turbulence occurs in the troposphere, the lowest layer of the atmosphere, where storms and unstable weather form. Commercial airplanes usually fly just above this zone, avoiding most weather-related turbulence. So why do we still feel turbulence at high altitude sometimes? That's because of something called clear air turbulence. Unlike storm-related turbulence, this type can appear without warning and is hard to detect on radar. That's why, even if the flight feels smooth, it's always a good idea to keep your seatbelt fastened. Now, what happens when an airplane has to fly lower than usual? But before we answer that, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any details. If a plane has to fly at a lower altitude, due to an emergency or airspace restrictions, several things can happen. First, the aircraft experiences more air resistance, causing engines to work harder and burn more fuel. Second, flying lower exposes the plane to more turbulence and adverse weather conditions. And third, commercial airplanes are designed to be most efficient at high altitudes. Flying low for long periods can increase structural wear due to higher air pressure. That's why, whenever possible, pilots try to return to optimal cruising altitude as quickly as they can. Does flying high make flights safer? Definitely. If something goes wrong mid-flight, like an engine failure, higher altitude gives pilots more time to react. An incredible example happened in 1982 with British Airways Flight 9. The aircraft flew through a volcanic ash cloud, which caused all 4 engines to fail. The plane lost all power and had to glide for several kilometers while the crew attempted to restart the engines. And they succeeded. In the end, they managed to land safely with no casualties. Now, if flying high has so many advantages, why don't planes go above 12,000 meters or 39,000 feet? There are 3 main reasons. First, oxygen becomes scarce at higher altitudes, which affects engine performance. Second, lift decreases. Wings need air to generate lift, and if the air is too thin, the aircraft becomes unstable. And third, passenger safety. Second, lift decreases. Wings need air to generate lift, and if the air is too thin, the aircraft becomes unstable. And third, passenger safety. If a sudden loss of cabin pressure occurs at extreme altitudes, the time available to put on an oxygen mask would be very short, putting passengers at serious risk. So now you know why commercial airplanes fly so high. They save fuel, avoid most turbulence, improve safety, and make flights more efficient. But here's a question for you. If airplanes could fly even higher than they do today, what do you think would change? Would flights be faster, safer, or maybe more dangerous? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your opinion. And if you enjoyed this video, you'll probably like these others too. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more amazing aviation facts.